Hello. My subscribers know that normally I cover audio and video technology. The more strange and wonderful the better. But this is part 2 of a series about a solar panel and Tesla Powerwall installation. So do see part 1 here, which was the pre-installation discussion with an engineer who came around and looked at the site and worked out what would be the best system for us. And here we are now about 10 weeks later, so there's a bit of a delay where we had some paperwork that had to be provided for us, and also all the equipment had to be bought in and everyone had to be made available and a date to suit us. But we've got there. So last week the scaffolders came in and put scaffolding at the front of the house ready for the solar panels to go on the roof. And this week, on Monday, the electrical fitters arrived. They installed the Tesla Powerwall, Tesla Gateway and Solar Edge inverter for the solar panels, and also a lot of the cabling. Then on Tuesday, the guys went up and put in the frames ready for the 16 solar panels. Then on the Wednesday, the panels were installed and the whole system was connected up and all got working all in that time. So that was pretty quick. And then by Friday, they like to leave it a day before removing the scaffolding just in case there's an issue and they need to go and service a panel. Everything was fine. So on Friday, the scaffolding came down and left us with the finished job. So let's have a look at the various components and see how they've been fitted. One of the things that Tesla Powerwall can do is act to help prevent power outages even if the utility fails. And actually the power in our area is not particularly reliable, so that's good. And in most cases it will kick in seamlessly, so you won't even know there's been a power outage in your street until you see your neighbour's lights go out and there's a notification on the Tesla app. But if the neutral line disappears for some reason in the utility supply, which is pretty unlikely, if that happens, then there will be some short outage before the Powerwall kicks in. Now, there's a decision to be made when the gateway is installed about whether that's going to attempt to power the entire house, which is actually a lot simpler to wire up, or whether it's going to have different circuits on your consumer unit and just power those, and so prolong the running time of the battery under a power outage situation. Now, personally, we thought we can manage our own load, so if we find that there's been a power outage in the street, because the Tesla app will inform you, then we can shed some of the load of things we don't really need at that moment. So perhaps we wouldn't run the induction hob or electric showers or the air conditioning, so we can manage that ourselves. But some people might not need to worry about that, might not want to worry about that, so they'd have certain circuits backed up and others not. But that's a bit more complicated to wire up. You have to split up different circuits on your consumer unit. So we went for back up everything. Now I must say, I think it'd be better if in the case of a power outage there was some kind of beeper or alarm or something more than just a notification on your app to let you know that the power is out and you want to go as gentle as you can on your power in case that outage lasts several hours, which can happen. Hello, so you're Kieran from Phoenix Works, and I see we've just about finished here. Can you explain to me what the parts are and what I need to know about them?
Yeah, of course. So we've been here this week installing a 7.75 kilowatt solar system, which is like 16 panels. We've put a Solar Edge inverter, and it's also coupled with a Tesla AC battery and backup gateway.
Right, so that's the inverter,
Yeah,
but is that any different to a normal string inverter?
Yes, so we've got optimizers on the roof, so any shading you get from any panels, it won't affect the full string, it'll just affect that one panel, so it's more efficient that way.
Yeah. And I understand we can communicate with the app, we can communicate or look at the output from each panel individually.
Yeah. And also,
so how does that data get down here?
So we've run an Ethernet cable into there, so it's got a wired Ethernet connection, so there's no risk of it dropping out through Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Also with Solar Edge, we can see when you've got a fault on your panel, so
Right.
we'll probably know before you lads, you'll realise, and we'll give you a call and let you know that you've got a fault on a panel and get someone out to have a look.
Right. And so these are the cables from the solar panels?
Yeah, them two black cables, the DC strings.
They're very thin cables, aren't they? So what's the voltage on those?
So it'd be, I think it's around 34 times how many panels you've got.
Is it? Right.
Yeah.
Right, that's really scarily high voltage. You don't want to mess with those cables, no. Okay. And it's just a case of live and neutral, is it? Or plus and minus?
Negative,
I don't think I'm going to touch them. No. That's a lot of voltage. Right, and then this gives us 240 volts.
Yeah.
So this isolator will isolate the panels.
AC. No,
that isolates the AC.
Your DC isolator is this little red switch there.
Okay.
That's to isolate your DC. That's for your AC, 230 volts.
Right. So if, for example, the fire service needed to isolate the solar panels, they would hit that switch.
Yeah.
Right. Are they familiar with these things?
Well, for their side of things, I suppose you could isolate it at the AC because it's got to kill power going into the house.
Right.
But to turn the power off, if anyone had to work on the panels, they'd have to turn it off at the DC, and they're more than familiar with that sort of thing.
Then we have the Powerwall. So this is what, 13 point something kilowatt hours, isn't it?
13.5, yeah.
Right. Okay. And I understand it comes with some rather wonderful green lights on the side, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah. Nice green LED.
But that's about it. Oh, there's an on-off switch, isn't there?
Yeah.
So that'd be normally on, but what would happen if you switched it off?
You wouldn't get any power through your battery.
Right, simple as that.
Yeah,
but nothing bad.
No, nothing bad.
Okay. And so this isolator.
That's your AC isolator for your battery.
Right.
So if anyone needs to come and work on your house and isolate your full distribution board, they need to kill that one and also your battery.
Okay.
It'll be still feeding into your grid.
Right. And then the other component is over there, isn't it?
Yep.
There's another Tesla item.
So that's the backup gateway. So we've taken feed from in your mains cupboard into the gateway and then back out into a Henley block which feeds your consumer unit.
Right. So none of this affected our consumer unit.
No.
Now, I understand that it's possible to wire it so that you can have certain parts of the house protected by the effectively using that as a UPS.
Yeah.
But we've gone for just the whole house, and we'll manage your load.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
You normally keep your high amperage stuff on the non-backup side, just in case you did have a power cut. You could keep it, prolong your battery life.
Yeah. And what happens if you say you are using the oven and what have you? When a power outage happens?
Yeah.
Presumably that won't be able to deliver that amount of current. So what does it do? Just drop out?
I believe it does run that sort of current, but you'll get a notification through your apps telling you you've had a power outage, so you can work off that to turn everything off. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and going back to this installation, sorry, I noticed you had, there it is, an earth wire here.
Yes.
But it isn't connected to anything, so what's that?
No, so we earth the rails up on the roof, just in case later on you want to upgrade to a different inverter, different model. Normally, sometimes have earth connections that need to be met.
Okay.
Or we would connect it if you were able to reach your panels from any Velux windows or anything like that.
See. Right.
Just so you don't get, you can't touch the extraneous parts and the panels at the same time and get a belt off of it.
Right, but that's not needed now.
It's not needed in this case because you don't have access to that.
Right, and also not having access, we don't have access as consumers to the inside of that, do we?
No. So it'd be Tesla approved services, or I think your household electrician can go in there.
And what are the? There's obviously a DIN rail there with some trips and a meter. What are those components?
So this is your 300 milliamp RCD for your house consumer unit, and then we've also got a main switch, a 100 amp main switch for your solar and battery, 32 amp breakers for your solar and your Powerwall, and then we've got a generation meter, which it's already calculated. It's made 2 kilowatts already while we've been
just been working on it today.
Yeah.
Right, on an overcast November day. Right. Okay. And everything else we might want to read, we get it off the apps, don't we? We're going to have 2 apps, aren't we?
Apps,
one for the Tesla and one for
the inverter.
Yeah.
So your Tesla app will basically tell you if you're drawing anything from the grid, your amount saved today, what your battery percentage is at, and all that kind of stuff. And then the Solar Edge app will tell you your panel data from each panel, what you've made monthly, yearly, quarterly, like stuff like that.
Okay, and one of the things we want to be able to do is charge this, especially in winter, charge this when we have off-peak electricity rate. And I gather that's going to be in the Tesla app somewhere.
Yes, it'll be in the Tesla app.
Yeah, we'll find that.
When you have a play around, you'll be able to find that and set that up.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much indeed for your time.
No worries. Thank you, mate.
Right,
cheers.
Now, it has to be said, there was one small problem we had. Right away, about half an hour after the installation was completed and the guys had left, all our lights went out. It was a very simple thing. They were able to come straight back out and rectify it straight away. When they were doing the final testing, the utility power switch had been left switched off, and so the Tesla Powerwall went flat, and we didn't check to see what was going on. We weren't familiar with the system. We hadn't realised that the Tesla Powerwall was complaining that there had been a utility failure. As far as it concerned, there had been. It was an easy fix anyway. Now let me show you a little bit about what I expected would happen with having a Powerwall and solar panels, and see if that actually comes off when we look at the app from Tesla. So we have solar panels which will generate electricity at certain times of the day, and we have a Powerwall which is like a huge battery, which we expected would store the energy from the solar panels during the day and give it up during the night. And then we have a house which consumes electricity. And furthermore, we expected that the electrical system, should we draw a pylon? Let me try and draw a pylon. The electrical system would provide energy to the house when neither of these could do so. But there's an extra feature. Between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m, our power company have discounted electricity. So what I expected to happen was the following. Between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m, energy could be sent to the battery, and at all other times the energy would come, the requirement for the house would come from solar by preference, then battery if there was no solar, and then finally from the utility if there's no battery or solar. That's what I thought would happen. Now, I was told that on day one, when the Powerwall is installed, not all the features are available. So you can't set the timings of your discounted electricity initially. Okay, wait a few days and that will come good. Tesla say it could take up to 2 weeks. In fact, it was about 3 days before some of the extra features appeared on the app. So let's have a look at the app. This draws a little pretty picture of pretty much what I have there. Okay, you have the solar panels, the house, the battery and the grid. And at the moment it's very overcast, so we're getting hardly any energy out of the solar panels, and the Powerwall, which has a certain amount of charge remaining, is powering the house. And there's a minimum kept in the battery which you can set, and it's by default, I think it was 16%, which is there as a reserve in case of a power outage, which is perfectly sensible. Be aware that some energy companies, I think Octopus Energy, fix this at 20% for you and you can't control it, which is less than helpful. You want to be able to do that yourself. Now, the app does allow you to look at maps of or graphs of what's happened in the past and even download data of what's happened in the past. But before we go there, we'll just go to the settings, and we see at the moment we are in what they call self-powered mode. So it says optimize energy independence or cost saving. So what's going on is it's working purely in a solar mode. It's not doing nighttime electrical charging from the grid on discounted electricity. For that, you would select time-based control. Now, we've told it when we have an off-peak area between 2 and 6, and it should charge the battery between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock. I've actually got it set for 2:30, and I'll tell you why later. So it should charge the battery between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. and then give up that energy when required if there's not sufficient solar. But it doesn't do that. It's ridiculously stupid. When it's in this timed mode, it will continue to function as we set a moment ago. Solar plus battery goes to house. But if there's excess solar, it's too stupid to charge the battery with it. It sends it out to the grid, which assumes that you're getting paid for electricity that goes out to the grid. But why would you send electricity out to the grid when your Powerwall is so low? Common sense says that you would want to charge your battery and only send energy out to the grid when the battery's full. But it seems that when it's in this time-based control mode, it treats the solar cells just as an extra source of energy for the house only, and will only charge the battery from the grid. That is just crazy. Why would you want that? So if we go to the self-powered mode, it will only use solar power and will not charge from the grid at discounted electrical rates, as is provided by a lot of the energy companies. So why would you want either of these two propositions? So what I'm presently having to do is, during the day, switch to self-powered mode so that it'll work from solar, and any excess solar will go into the battery, and then every evening when the sun has gone down, switch it to time-based control so that it will charge up at night. Now, I understand it's supposed to learn and be an intelligent system, and it could learn and be intelligent. What it should do is, during the winter, give the battery 100% charge overnight, because there won't necessarily be very much sunlight available, and the house will probably consume all of the solar plus all of the battery during the day, and revert to this at some time during the evening. But during the summer, when there's an excess of solar energy available, it could say charge to 50% or some other figure, and it could work it out based on how much sunlight there's going to be. You could even look at the weather forecast, and I believe it does do that because there's a storm watch here, so it has the ability to read weather forecasts. It could, in summer, look at whether you're going to have a sunny day and therefore charge the battery to less than 100% on the assumption that you won't need all that energy because it'd be topped up from solar. That would be the perfect solution. I can look back at the plots we've had for some days. In fact, you can download the data as a CSV file and drop it into Excel or similar. And we're going to go back to the very first days. This was the very first day I had the unit, and we didn't have that option of time-based control. And so, I think it was the second day actually, I had the bright idea. Remember I'd said that this reserve can be changed from 16%. I changed it to 100% at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it, after a bit of conditioning due to being a cold night, then charged up all the way until 6 a.m. But it only reached, this is a sort of percentage meter here, it only reached around about 60% because it didn't charge at the full charging power. Couldn't do it for whatever reason, But at least it had the intelligence then, or I was able to charge on the cheap rate electricity, and that was able to give out in the morning, and then we had a sunny day, some sunshine during the day, then the sun went down, and the battery wall provided all this energy until a certain cut-off point the oven was on, and a certain cut-off point at whatever time that was, at about 1900 hours, and then we had to switch over. So we're no longer, battery walls no longer involved. We had to switch over to utility power at that point. Up here you can switch between looking at the battery wall, the utility power, the sunlight available, and the house consumption. So looking at the utility power, we should see around about 1900. We've gone all day with no electricity use. Actually, we fed a tiny bit back into the grid. All day with no electricity use after the 6 a.m. And then we had to start using some electricity from the grid. So that all looks sensible, apart from the fact I wasn't able in those 4 hours to charge the Powerwall sufficiently. But the next day, the feature switched on for us to have the timed control. Now we were able to charge at much greater charge, 3.5 kilowatts, and it got all the way up to 100%. Excellent. So we can charge between 2 and 6 a.m. and then it can give out power until daylight arrives. It was a rather overcast day. Got a little bit of charge from the sunlight, gave out some more power, and then quit on us around about 1600 because it just wasn't very much solar energy that day. But still, it looks good at first glance, until you take a closer look, and the following day was a fairly similar story. And on both days, something stupid happened. If you look closely, you'll see that this is the 6 a.m. point here. So what's going on? The battery gets to 100%, and instead of staying at 100% and keeping fully charged and not giving out any power until 6 a.m. when we switch over to peak rate electricity, it stupidly at about 5 a.m. stopped charging and started giving out energy to the house. Why would we want that? Come on, Tesla. You already know that the cheap rate is between 2 and 6, so why in heaven's name are you giving out energy at that point that we need for later on in the day? Just who wrote this software? The next day, thinking ahead, I thought, okay, what I'll do is I'll tell it that the cheap rate electricity is actually until 6:30 and hopefully push it that way. But no, it still did the same stupid thing. It charged up and then at around about 5 a.m. switched to output mode and started putting electricity on the house. So it didn't stay fully charged until 6 o'clock here and then start giving out. It started giving out energy before 6 o'clock. Not massively before, it has to be said, but nonetheless it did. So that was stupid. Here again you can see it. There's the 6 a.m. point, and it's already gone down from 100 to some figure, probably around about 80% by 6 a.m. instead of staying fully charged. So my plan for today, because this is the next day, my plan for this evening is to tell it not to start charging until 2:30 a.m. and hopefully push the whole sequence along, because it won't get to 100% until 6 a.m. and then switch over then. So that might work. But we shouldn't have to kludge the software around like this. It should have the intelligence to charge on the cheap electricity and retain it until it's needed. So you tell me, if you have this software and you have a Powerwall, are you having the same difficulties getting the Powerwall software to do the basic obvious functions? Looking at our electricity consumption today then, between 2 and 6 it was very high. It was peaking a little bit before that because the Powerwall had gone flat from the previous day. Charged up till 6 and it stayed off so far all day. But since the Powerwall is now getting quite low, it's already at this time of day, where are we? It's 12:41 and the Powerwall is already down to almost down to 16%. So it's going to fail today because it's been such a miserable day in terms of sunshine. Let's look at the output from the panels. We've had a few useful peaks, but nothing of great consequence today. Whereas if we look back a few days, we had some quite useful days where we actually generated enough energy there to really charge the battery a good percentage. The final tab here is the energy consumption of our home, and that's not particularly interesting to you in this case. So looking at the system we have as it is right now, our Powerwall is down to 25%. We're only getting 400 watts from solar because it's an extremely miserable day. The home is consuming a kilowatt, so the Powerwall is giving out 600 watts. Quite frankly, the inability of it to properly use the charge from the discount electricity at night, and then to make best use of it during the day and night without manually switching modes, all makes me rather grumpy. My experiment of holding off the charging until 2:30 so that it will hit 100% at 6 o'clock seems to have worked fairly well. It's a bodge, but I shouldn't have had to. So it then went down to some percentage, say 60% or so in the morning, and now it is charging at least part of the time from the solar panels. Let me demonstrate. We've switched from self-powered to time-based control, and the sun is coming out. At the moment it's a little bit low, but I'm hoping in a moment the sun will get bright enough that will generate more solar energy than the house is using. And what you'd expect it to do is put the surplus back into the Powerwall. But what I've seen it doing is put it into the grid. So let's watch and see what happens if and when the sun gets bright enough that it provides more energy than the house is using. Right. So energy is going into the Powerwall, as you'd hope. That's in the time-based control mode. That is quite categorically not what happened last time I tried it. Last time I tried this, the surplus energy went into the grid. So if that now works reliably and it continues to provide solar to the Powerwall when there is spare, even in the timed mode, then we have everything configured as we wish. That's behaving a lot better than it was last time I tried it. So that problem seems to be solved. It's fixed itself. So now the solar energy is correctly charging the Powerwall, even when it has been left in time-based control mode. So now I should be able to leave it in that mode permanently. The only bodge I've had to do was delay the start of the nighttime charging so that it doesn't start discharging too early. If we look at the figures for last night, by delaying charging till 2:30, it made it pretty much to 6 o'clock at 100%, and now you can see it's discharged this morning when we were using energy in the house, but there was no sunlight, and it is now charging from solar, and the battery level should start to increase. Excellent. That works now in winter because we're needing full 100% charge overnight. But in summer, it's entirely likely that we'll only want, say, 50% charge overnight because we'll have so much energy during the day that we will get to 100% on the battery. And we don't want to end up putting power back into the grid that we've paid for. So I'm going to have to balance what time I start the charge to try to get to some point, say 50 or whatever percent during the summer. It should have the intelligence for me to be able to set what my target charge level is and hold it there until off-peak finishes. Okay, the system is fully working now. we're having those difficulties with the Tesla app, but I've worked around it, and maybe there'll be some updates later or some other workarounds to solve those problems. Now, when the solar panels generate more energy than either the home or the Powerwall can consume, and that could happen even this time of year, but certainly will happen in the summer, you would feed energy automatically into the grid. The system, the gateway, will do that, and you'll see it on the app. But in order to get paid for that energy, you'll need to provide your energy provider with your MCS installation certificate number. And that's not the same thing as the company's MCS accreditation number, which you could look up on their website. This is a specific certificate for your installation. So you'll need to provide that when you get it, probably a few days after the installation is complete. Now, this is part 2 of this 3-part series. Part 1 I hope you've seen already, which was the planning of the system. And part 3 I plan to do sometime in the summer of next year. So we've had some time to see how the system responds, both in winter and summer. And I'll look at some of the earnings, how much money we're saving, and see whether or how long it's going to take before the whole system pays for itself. Now, normally my channel covers audio and video technology. I very much hope you might have a look at some of that. If you're not a subscriber already, please consider subscribing. But in the meantime, I'll say goodbye for now and come back in the summer and watch part 3.